Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast, episode number 63 here. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm bringing you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. And I'm coming to you from on the road. I'm in Portland, Oregon, having a great time on a vacation/writer's retreat thing going on here. Getting lots of writing done, but even more reading of LitRPG stories. And I got 7 new reviews for you this week. First review is going to be for Slain Time. Tamer's Chronicles, Volume 1. After that will be Human, a LitRPG novel, Tower of Gates LitRPG Series, Book 2. Then after that is going to be Stunlocked, a LitRPG thriller, Kings and Conquests, Book 2. And then after that it'll be Reborn as a Dungeon Core, Volume 2, Feared. After that it'll be Wild Times in Virtual Reality, Total Immersion VR Adventures, Unlimited LitRPG. After that it's going to be Gamer Girl, Caught in the Game, an Erotic LitRPG adventure. And finally it'll be Unexplored, Into the Wilderwood, a LitRPG virtual fantasy adventure. So there you go. 7 titles. The last 3 are kind of sexy, I guess. Okay, but of course we're going to begin with LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to start with Caverns and Creatures and Robert Bevan. Robert Bevan, creator of the Caverns and Creatures universe. You might remember his the novels in there called Critical Failure series. He started a Patreon page. He's kind of exploring different methods of letting users support him. And he just started this week, and only in a few days that it's existed, he already has 25 people who have signed up for his Patreon. There's only one reward tier at this point, a dollar tier. He's exploring different options of rewards for the people who want to support him, things that he's going to do, whether it's going to be early releases or putting people in novels or whatever. He's thinking about it, and you can submit your suggestions to him at his regular Facebook page. But I thought it was interesting, and I'm always happy to let you folks know whenever an author creates something like this, because it's a fun way it's a good way, I should say, of supporting your favorite authors. And maybe hopefully usually getting like early releases and core rewards at the same time as well. So there you go. Okay, also in LitRPG news this week, Michael Chatfield's Time of Change, which is the 7th book in his series, the Emerald series, it was taken down mysteriously by Amazon. The reason? Well, they claim that their automated programs flagged it as not belonging to the author weeks after it was released, apparently. Even after the author resubmitted the manuscript, it still took a few days for it to get fixed. It's back up now, so if you go check it out, it's there for you to purchase if you want to. I kind of question, like, is this a sad case of mistaken digital identity or a nefarious conspiracy to bring down a popular LitRPG author? I'll let you decide. Okay, also in LitRPG news, Baron Sword, author of Returnity Online, has published a director's cut edition of the novel. Now, just based on the title, I thought it was a really cute twist of like a way of putting out a second edition of your story. He's actually not putting out a second edition. It's actually going to be an entirely new book. So the reviews from the first edition aren't going to carry to this one. And he plans to actually delete the first version of it from Amazon's pages. He sent me a message about it, asking let me let you folks know. He got some negative reviews on the first edition of the novel, and apparently he's worked really hard on addressing the issues that the reviews brought up. He's primarily addressed reader complaints that the main character, Logan, is a total jerk and really hard to relate to or root for. The other says that he's changed Logan's dialogue. He also feels that the extent of the changes in the story warrant an entirely new publication with new cover art and a slightly different title. The statement from the author to me was, quote unquote, "A ton of people were unhappy with what a jerk Logan, the hero, was in the original version. I didn't realize that he was that jerky, lol. So I substantially revised the character. He's no longer a jerk, and he has a gamer background. Although much of the story is still the same, the kidnapping of his sister, the quest, the monsters, the leveling, etc., Logan's responses are very different. I've also added some new material about his background and new scenes to clarify the larger story of what's going on behind the scenes at Neurosoft, makers of Returnity, the game." So there you go. I personally looked over the novel. I've only reread the first 30% of it, though. So it may change afterwards. But the biggest changes that I can see so far in the novel essentially are there are some additional scenes there. Early in the story, there's an added scene that shows the main character Logan protecting a kid named Ben from a bunch of teenage bullies. And while I suspect that the scene is supposed to show how Logan is a protector character, standing up for the little guy, he just kind of comes off as a different kind of jerk. One that threatens teen bullies as an adult with physical violence. So, different way. Additionally, the way that Logan treats his brother in the early portion of this novel, that hasn't changed at all. He still thinks of him as a leech and a loser for gaming so much. And even though at the end I went in advance to check it out to see the change, when it's revealed, spoilers, that the brother is actually the breadwinner for him and his father, that he pays all the bills, he pays for the groceries and everything in the household, and so he's not really a leech. He's actually the breadwinner for like him and his dad. The main character still doesn't really acknowledge it, and he's more interested in like the wads of cash that his brother have to try to pay the ransom for the sister. But he doesn't actually acknowledge his bad behavior in the previous portions of the novel or make any attempts to correct it. Additionally, there is an added like little inserts of AI conversations that implies some manipulation from the game itself to kidnap the sister, which may kind of change the way you see the events and maybe add it to like lead into like book 2. I'm not really sure. Again, I haven't finished looking over the entire book. This is just my impression of the first 30% when I reread it. So there you go. That's it for LitRPG news. Now, there's our other stories that came out this week that I haven't had a chance to read. I got 7 out. These are the ones that are still though that I haven't, but I'll be looking at them next week. This includes Slave in the Lost Lands, the LitRPG, The Weirdest Noob Book 2. Also, Fjorgyn, The Deep Below. This is the second book in that series. Additionally, The Vale of Three Wolves, a LitRPG adventure, Elements of Wrath Online Book 2. Then after that, there's also Endgame, a LitRPG adventure, Crucible Shard Book 7. I believe that is the last book in this series. So it should be bringing everything to a conclusion. And then also Extinction, Phase 1, a LitRPG military horror. Interesting. Okay. New LitRPG audiobooks that have come out this week. There is Eden's Gate, The Sparrow, a LitRPG adventure written by Edward Brody, narrated by Pavi Prozoksko. Also, there's DLC, The Crucible Shard Book 6. So the author's really getting these audiobooks turned out really quickly. It's narrated by Doug Tigsdale Jr., and then Hero of Thera, written by Eric Newland, narrated by Jeff Hayes, friend of the podcast. That is also out as a LitRPG audiobook. Okay, also an upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read off a list of stuff that's coming out for the next August and September. Skip ahead if you don't wish to listen to that long list, but there are some new additions to that list. On August the 4th, there should be The Glitch Fiends, Part 2, Hell's Glitch Book 3. On August the 8th, it'll be Side Quest. On the 8th of August as well, Beyond All Expectations, Emerelia Book 8 will be out as well on August the 8th. On August the 11th, Stratus Online, Awakening Stratus Online, a LitRPG Book 1 will be out. On the 15th of August, it'll be Pharaoh Book 4. Also on the 15th of August, The Last Word Ungaya. On the 20th of August, it'll be Shaman's Revenge, Way the Shaman Book 6. 22nd of August, Shards of Reality. 28th of September, 20th of September, On the Lost Continent, Alter Game Book 2. And then newly added to the list, September the 30th, it'll be Infinite Reality, Daggerland Online Novel 1, a LitRPG adventure. Long titles here. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. Okay, in new releases and reviews, we're going to be with my review of Slime Tamer's Chronicle Volume 1 in the Slime Tamer's Chronicle series. Written by Nathan Valerio. It is 320 pages, $3.50. Not available on Kindle Limited. I'll read you my description of it. Originally published on the Railroad as a way to overcome writer's block, it's now on Amazon as a full-blown novel. Volume 2 of the series is actually still up there on the Railroad if you want to go check that out. This is a slice of life or daily adventure story. There's no really big plot going on here. It's more of just like, oh, let's explore this magical RPG world. So just be aware that when you go into it, so if that's an issue for you, you're probably not going to like it. But if you're cool with that kind of storyline, this is actually entertaining for the most part. The beginning of the story is really straightforward and interesting, and I actually really like the beginning half of the story. Even that, like this really beginning section. A male teen has a really bad, shitty life. His parents are divorced, and he's beaten daily by his frustrated stockbroker dad, who has sole custody of him. He trains in secret to learn martial arts, and he kills his dad the next time he comes to beat him. So he sells off all his dad's stocks, sends the money to his mom, who he hasn't seen in a really long time, and doesn't plan to see again. And then while on his way to leave the city and flee the scene, he's killed by a truck in an auto collision. And so that's like the first few percentages of this novel. Again, it is relatively long, but even just that one section, like it's straightforward, gets to the point. It tells you the woe is me portion of the story for the main character, but it's not for sympathy. This is his life in comparison to what is going to be coming along and some of his issues. But I like the fact that the main character did something about it. He didn't just say, oh, sad me, and then go to the virtual world and still complain about his bad life. He did something before it all happened. So I enjoy that portion of it. Also, after he dies, he's reincarnated by the god of reincarnation, who's puzzled by the balanced karma that the kid has. And he reincarnates him into a new game world. The main character is cursed with a low physical score, but blessed with high magical affinity and a peaceful aura that ensures no animals in the world will attack him. It meshes with his natural affinity animals, and he's reincarnated as a girl. So there you go. So he gets a new point of view on life as well. So it's an entertaining first portion of it. And again, from the 3% mark to about the 24% mark, it's really, that's where like he's in the game world. The main character learns about her new RPG world, that she's really OP. She's really overpowered as a character. So just be aware of that going into it. But it's about making friends, family, learning that she has a special knack for slime training, which becomes like the big theme for like her special power and ability, in addition to her overpowered magic skills. And it's cute and it's very funny at times. And there's a lot of like cool little smaller like stories within it. And again, this first 24% of it is the part I liked the best. Like if it had just been this, I would have really given it a good score. Enjoyable. But at the 24% mark, it skips ahead 3 years and it explains why in the story. And then it turns into a magical academy story. And while portions of it are still entertaining and interesting, there were like some cool battles, some dungeon making stuff that I found really fascinating and cool. There's even like a Mario Kart race esque short story in there. Most of it is slice of life magical academy school stuff, and that's just not my kind of story. I don't enjoy that personally, and it's mostly because I always end up comparing it to Harry Potter, and no other magical academy story kind of stacks up to that massive franchise that has a special place in my heart. So for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. But like I said, that first 24% part was actually quite good and entertaining. So there you go. Okay, on to Human, a LitRPG novel, Tower of Gates LitRPG series book 2, written by Paul Ballot. Okay, this is 405 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm going to read you my description of the story, mostly because the author does not give you kind of a recap of what happened in book 1. He just kind of drops you in there. And that's one of many issues that I had with the story. So just a heads up, the main characters in this story are Eric, Sarah, and Troy. 3 teens who in book 1 jumped into this experimental virtual reality system and got trapped in this fantasy world. And they're not really sure if they're ever going to get out. It's like apparently a bunch of hackers and other developers have also been trapped in this game intentionally. Not explaining exactly why, but that's the case. And so the big goal for these 3 characters is to find some way out of the story by exploring all the levels and sub-levels of this particular, massive game, virtual reality game. In book 1, they finished level 1-1 in book 2, it's going to be level 1-2 that they're trying to complete. And the big quest, of course, is to escape eventually by traveling through all these levels and finding some kind of portal or way out of the game. Additionally, there are a couple side characters, Evan and Ewan, 2 brownies that Sarah, an elf mage, that's her character in the game, kind of picked up as friends, pets. And then there's Bernard, who's another player that's been trapped in the game, but in the system, when you die, you become a non-player character until somebody kind of pulls you out of it by talking to you about game stuff. And so there you go. So at the very beginning of this novel, they spawn in level 1-2, which is oddly enough set hundreds of years in the past of level 1-1 time travel stuff. Always a red flag for me. So there you go. And I guess the bad guy, of course, is Magi Inyanto, a game designer player who, for some reason that's never really truly explained, wants to kill these kids and ruin their lives, and is a griefer, basically. So that's kind of a quick recap of what this story is about from book 1. And that is okay. So in book 2, the big goal is essentially how they get out of this level is they have to free a dragon and let I wrote it down. I'll just read it. The story starts with Eric, Sarah, Bernard, Evan, Owen starting 1-2. There's a lot of random stuff that happens on the novel, but the gist of the story is that the bad guy is trying to create a game world with only the human race left. All the other fantasy races, he's trying to knock them out. He's blocked the dwarves from this level by putting a dragon at the entrance, thus eliminating them in the future. So time travel stuff. Our group of heroes has to defeat this dragon and free the dwarves trapped in the mine, and then they can travel to level 1-3. Now, by some unexplained means, Josh, the third kid trapped in the game, finds the group and joins them at the 21% mark. They also find the one and only dwarf not trapped, who kits out the entire group with a bunch of magic items. And then at the very end of the story, the thing with the dragon and the dwarves gets resolved. I'm leaving out a bunch of stuff because mostly it doesn't matter. And secondly, I don't want to give too many spoilers for people who are going to read this and enjoy it. Now, the game mechanics and the story are totally solid. They're detailed. They're not as interesting as I was hoping they were going to be from what was happening in book 1, but they're not bad. They're definitely solid, and they're throughout the novel, so it is definitely LitRPG. There's no question about that. But a lot of the rest of the story feels very random. There's a bunch of side quests and fights in the story that almost feel like they're inserted as filler or for things for the main characters to do to get new weapons or to get experience. And that's fine, but when you learn about, from my point of view, I guess, the main characters learn about what they need to do to leave the level at the first few percentage points of the novel, 5% I think, and then they don't finish it, even get to it until the end of the story. And with the exception picking up Troy at the 20% mark, Josh, and then finding the dwarf at the 30% mark, those are the only kind of big points that needed to be done. So everything else in between those sections just feels unnecessary, and while occasionally it's entertaining, a lot of it is only meh, if at all. There is almost no character advancement in the story. The characters themselves don't really grow, and then at the end of the novel, I don't know any more really about them, their backgrounds, why are they doing the things that they do, than I did at the beginning. And so for me, there is really not a lot of personal character growth for any of the characters, like the main characters. Also, the advancement of the story doesn't really happen by the main character's actions. It happens because of the new side characters that are introduced in the story, especially the dwarf that's brought in just for this one particular novel at this point. And so for me, that also made it feel like what the main character is doing aren't important. And that was kind of an issue I had with book 1 as well. Now, in book 1, I had issues with it. A lot of the flaws that I saw in book 1 have been fixed. The narrative structure of the story in book 1 was very confusing, and this is a multi-perspective story. So at some point, it's told from one character's point of view, Sarah. Other times it's told from Eric's point of view, and other times it's told from Josh's point of view. And in book 1, it's switched a lot. Like every other page sometimes was a different character's point of view, and it got confusing. That thankfully has been fixed on the story. So there are improvements from book 1 to book 2. There are like 2 or 3 sections at least where it's one character perspective. Now, unfortunately, the narrative points of view aren't really voiced differently. Like, I don't know that I would really notice that the perspective shifts without, like, at the very top of the top saying Josh or Sarah, basically. Like, their voices in their sections don't really change from person to person. So that's one thing that I also noticed. Additionally, some of the things I liked in book 1 don't appear anymore in book 2. The quest system I thought was really cool for book 1 because it seemed to address each individual person's foibles, their fears, their issues. And it kind of seemed to me to generate quests based upon them fixing those issues. And that entirely disappears from the story. So that was kind of sad to me as well. And again, the real big thing that kind of bugged me was the fact that all the advancement in the story happens because of other people and not our 3, teens that are trapped in this story. I mean, especially this is evident when at one point they're literally given a room full of magical items to kit out the entire group from a character that they just met minutes ago. And that means like, oh, okay, this is, these guys aren't actually doing anything to like advance the story, which bothers me. For those reasons, and because the evil betrayals at the very end of the story don't really make sense to me, and they feel like they were done just for titillation or just as a twist, some weird twist at the end, I didn't enjoy the story very much. I get the score of 4 out of 10 for me. So there you go. But again, if you like book 1, you probably don't like book 2. I just don't like book 1. I give it a score of 4 to 10. This one gets the same score. So there it is. Okay, on to Stunlocked, a LitRPG thriller, Kings and Conquests, book 2 from Shane Lachlan Black. Okay, this one's a quick review. It is 165 pages, $2.99. It is about on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description of the story. It was the shot heard around the internet. The inevitable standoff between professional gaming's highest paid mercenary and the suddenly famous host of the No Names Games video cast took place in an underground tomb near Safety Ridge. The ensuing struggle over an assassin's level 72 weapon left the Highwaymen's in-game rival destroyed, and the battle lines drawn. Jordan Hall thought Kings and Conquests were just a game. His friends thought they were just along for the ride. But someone wants them dead. And in the real world, there are no rerolls. Now Jordan is out of time and on the run. Standing between him and $1 billion prize is a shadowy coven of ruthless killers controlling events both in-game and in the real world. All he has left is a malfunctioning augmented reality interface, a level 7 founder's account, and a 3D printer that serves as a doorway from game world to real world. What Jordan doesn't realize is something is about to step through that doorway, and its quest consists of only 2 words. Avenge me. So there you go. Again, 165 pages, $2.99. Available on Kindle Unlimited. I don't know that I would have purchased this. It's a good read on Kindle Unlimited, but the price point per page count is a little more than I generally like to pay. Book 1, real quick as a review, not LitRPG. Essentially, there was so little actual game content in book 1, even though they talked a ton about the game and they talked a ton about like skills and progressions. It was all not in the game. It was people outside of the game, and part of that issue was the fact that the game is told from the perspective of people looking at a computer screen, clicking on a mouse and moving their characters around, and the thriller portion of it also took place entirely outside of the game, and so for those reasons, it wasn't LitRPG to me. Book 2 has the same exact issues. There is more in-game time. Like there are some few adventures as the big group of characters who got the big prize at the end tried to cash it in. But the majority of the story takes place outside of the game, whether it's people talking in a boardroom or characters outside of the actual game talking about what they're planning to do with their characters, or plans for creating crafting empires, bounty hunter teams being organized to catch the no-name guild before they cash in the company stock, or whatever, the majority of that stuff just takes place outside of the game. And so a very small percentage of the story is in the game again. So for those reasons, again, it's just not lit RPG to me. Like, you have to have, to me, a good section of your story in game. You know, that's the lit RPG part of it. The RPG is the game part. Not just people talking about a game, but actually in the game, either playing it or having their characters there. So it's unfortunate because, again, the thriller portion of it is not unentertaining. It is slightly less entertaining than it was in book 1 for me here, but it's just not lit RPG. So score 4 out of 10. There you go. Okay, on to Reborn as a Dungeon Core Volume 2, feared, written by myself, not you. That's the actual writer's name on this particular novel. Myself, not you. Cute. The author's description is super tiny. The misanthrope has taken the fight out of his dungeon and is now attacking the town he hated. That's it. It is 97 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. As far as price points go, way overpriced. I think 3 cents per page. So too much for me, but as a Kindle Unlimited story, it's cool. This is the kind of story that I think a lot of people will be interested who have Kindle Unlimited because it's different and it's interesting. Full disclosure, the author sent me a copy for review. I actually bought the novel when it became available. I enjoyed it that much that I just didn't pick it up on Kindle Unlimited. I actually paid $2.99, even though I think it's overpriced. I wanted to encourage the author, so I bought it. Okay. Again, this is volume 2 of the series of the story. I'm going to give you a quick recap of volume 1 because the author does not do so. The story in volume 2 literally starts right after the events of volume 1. Like, you could smash them together as a compilation and you wouldn't notice where volume 1 switches to volume 2. So just as a quick recap, kid has a bad experience. Crappy life. He gets a mysterious quest from who knows, but it's like a blue screen saying, if you want to be Dungeon Core, if you want to be reborn as one great power, you have to kill some people within this amount of time. And he does it, and he's reborn as a Dungeon Core. And he's a really tiny Dungeon Core in book 1. And most of the story is him creating a realistic, super tiny dungeon in like some neighbor's yard or something, and he grabs a bunch of insects. It's really insect themed, like what a dungeon thing based on like realistic principles in our world, using insects be like, and that's kind of the big part of the story. And it's very classic dungeon-y story with like upgrading, killing, invading insects coming in, or like but gradually going from like teeny tiny creatures like ants to hornets to earwigs, crickets, and then larger creatures like frogs, rats, and eventually hornets. And then at the very end of the story, book 1, it had the main character who's literally using like swarms of hornets to go kill humans and get a bunch of soul points, which is like the resource he uses to create his dungeon monsters and the dungeon itself. And so that ends volume 1. And in volume 2, really literally picks up from there. The hornets are going into larger communities, malls, other places, killing massive amounts of humans. And that's where it starts off at. So things go from a micro setting to a kind of a macro experience of killing swarms of wasps and summoning even larger and more interesting creatures. And the story actually takes a kind of a fantasy twist in this, in that it's not as realistic in the exploration of monsters and dungeon stuff. It really does take on a fantasy-esqueness, because now because of the terror he instills in his community, he actually gets the opportunity from the game system to summon whatever monster he wants. So he has to consider, of all the fantasy creatures in the universe, what would he be able to afford and what would be useful for his reign of human murder, I guess. But I thought it was interesting, although there are still a couple sad scenes. And honestly, I was more saddened by like when he has to kill like a dog to like make it a part of his dungeon list of summonable creatures. I was more sad about that than all the humans he kills in this entire novel. And I think that's a really interesting effect to have. How quickly I was just like, these are just more humans to kill. It wasn't, these are all named characters, little girls, old men, boys. It was very quickly I became like, I empathized enough with the main character, and then I say, they're just humans to kill so that I can get soul power, and that's neat to me that the author did that and had that effect on me personally. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. That shows how quickly you empathize with the dungeon core. And again, at the end of the novel, there are hints that there's even a larger world, and that other dungeons are in the world. Especially in like I think it's Brazil and Japan, like the news is starting to report on these magical creatures terrorizing these parts of the world, and even hints that there are humans with magical powers opposing these monsters and these dungeons. So hopefully there's some even more cool stuff happening in book 3 or volume 3, I should say, when it comes out. But overall, good read for me. I can tell you right off the bat, not everybody's gonna like this novel. Even some people who liked volume 1, because it does kind of shift away a little bit from dungeon creation and more of like gathering SP or soul points for monster summoning stuff. I think it's going to go back into more dungeon stuff in book 3, so that's just my guess. But I genuinely was surprised by how much I enjoyed just the journey of the dungeon collecting soul points, killing humans, creating and upgrading as monsters. That was entertaining enough for me. And again, it's a short read. It's less than 100 pages, so not a huge investment of time. And this story actually gets the best score of any of the stories in this entire podcast. It gets a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to sex stuff. Sex stories. LitRPG Erotic. Okay, the next 3 novels all have graphic sex scenes, so just a heads up about that. I grouped them together because I think they provide a very interesting set of examples of how different authors are trying to combine erotica sex with LitRPG. And there are different combinations of sex and game stuff in each one of these. And I kind of liked seeing them as examples of these are things that work out well. These are things that didn't work out well. And some of the combinations of sex and LitRPG stuff do really well, and some don't. So I'm going to read them. I'm just going to review them, but I'll also I'll also be comparing them. So just a heads up. Okay, first off is Wild Times in Virtual Reality, Total Immersion VR Adventures Unlimited, LitRPG. Whew, that title alone is like a red flag to me. Anytime I see like a super long title with a bunch of like tag keywords, it's always like, oh, is this author trying to tell a story, or is it trying to, hit a bunch of bases? It is written by Garth Ono. This is 168 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you my description because it's much shorter than the authors. Ariana going with friend Tom and Charlie to a total immersion VR facility. The main character, Ariana, is worried that people will start rumors if they knew that she goes with 2 guys to this game place. There she creates her character, a chesty, sexy rogue, and finds the amenity of the game frees her to satisfy her dark, sexy desires. Now, just as a heads up, if you read the description of this story, there's no mention that there's like graphic sex. It's sort of inferred from like part of it. The authors in the description of the novel says, this book deals with adult themes and uninhibited virtual reality, so there's more than just flirting going on while the players fight assorted fantasy creatures and other players. And I honestly feel like the author should be a little more just transparent, just say there is sex in this novel, or call it an erotic LitRPG if you want to go that way. Because it was sort of surprising to me how much sex was in this novel. And I just think it would have been a better choice to do it that way. That's, again, personal opinion. Authors do what you want to do. Essentially, to me, though, this story is a fantasy sex romp with occasional reminders that it's supposed to be set in a VR game. And that's basically how I feel about this novel. There's a lot of sex. About 20% of all the novel's text is dedicated to graphic sex scenes. The main character, Ariana, has sex with elves, dark elves, orcs, vampires, the whole fantasy shebang. And so there's a ton of graphic sex in various, and there's also themes of like bondage, and submission and domination in there as well. So, it is a big part of the story. Like, to me, that's the core of the story. The extent of the game mechanic of the story are name tags that appear when the main character looks at people, looks over people's heads and focuses there. And there's one, and exactly only one example of the main character getting experience points after she escapes being made a sex slave early in the story. That's it. Those are the only game mechanics in the entire story. there are a lot of references like, oh, this is a great virtual reality game. I want to add more time to my time, my more money so I can spend more time here. But as far as like actual game mechanics though, not a lot. That's it. There you go. And so for me, this is a novel without the things that make it a lit RPG story. There's no RPG part of it. There's virtuality. It's a fantasy setting, and for me, it read mostly like, oh, this is portal fiction fantasy, sexual in a fantasy world, and it just happens to be also a VR story or something. So yes, again, the novel is in a VR world with very few game mechanics. Those all largely disappear as the story goes on. There is no character progression according to the game rules, so it's not lit RPG to me. So it automatically, gets a bad score. And to me, it would have been better described as a fantasy action sex story set in a VR simulation. Either way, it's not really my kind of story. And as far as the action goes, it does exist. So there are fight scenes. So I'm not saying it's just sex. But all the fight scenes are really leading up to more sex, and most of the scenes in the story are they're leading to sex or going away from sex, and that's kind of what this is. So for me, it gets a score of 4 out of 10. There you go. And so just connecting to other things, this would be an example of a story that's more sex than game lit RPG, which kind of knocks it out as lit RPG for me. So this would be an example of something that didn't quite get that balance right. Okay, on to our next one. Gamer Girl Caught in the Game, an erotic lit RPG adventure. That's right on Front Street, so there you go. I got to give the author credit for that. Written by Kat Wilder. Okay, I will read you my description of the story. It is 102 pages, 99 cents, perfectly priced. It is also, available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, the author, again, in the description also gives a fair warning to the readers. She says, this lit RPG book is adult themed, both bloody and sexy, prudes and squeamish. People should avoid lest your hold on sanity be shaken. So the author is really cheeky about how much sex is in it, but the author is upfront about that the erotic stuff is a big part of the story. That to me is the right way to do it, because you let your readers know right off the bat, either this is something they're looking for or it's not something they're looking for because of the sex. And for a lot of people, the sex stuff is, it's kind of a deal breaker for a lot of people. Okay, my description of the story. Carly plays the best full immersion virtual reality video game around. It lets players do anything, including have sex. Unfortunately, when her guild conquers the castle of a dark wizard, he curses her with some strange magic that not only deletes the avatar she's using, but traps her in a new low-level one that prevents her from logging out of the game. Now she has to try to figure out how to escape before the doctors unplug her body from the game, potentially killing her. So there you go. That's the premise of the story. Now again, this story takes the trapped in a game trope and mixes it with a lot of action and a lot of graphic sex. As Carly, the main character, figures out her situation, fights monsters galore, explores the world, and figures out how to get the wizard that trapped her there to release her. Again, she has a lot of sex with fantasy creatures. The main character is New Class. The evil wizard, again, trapped her in a newbie avatar with a specific class, and it's called the Wench of Easy Virtue class, which is, again, there's a lot of humor in this novel as well, and it contributes to her enhanced sex drive. Like basically she almost, and again, is part of the story, but it's also told with like a humorous wink and a nod that she's so horny that she has sex with all the bad guys or all the creatures she meets. In total, the novel has 18% of the story devoted to graphic sex scenes. So again, a good chunk, almost fifth of the novel, is just sex stuff. So it's a big part of the novel. However, the story also has very detailed game mechanics that it constantly uses throughout the story, and that's what makes it lit RPG. So this is a good example of a much better balance than the last one, of combining erotica and lit RPG stuff, because the game mechanics have to continue on the story. They can't just be a few mentions and then like, oh, it's, LitRPG because it's in virtual reality. This is a much better example of that balancing act. And I don't have a problem with it being erotic LitRPG. As long as the LitRPG stuff is still there in the entire story, you know what I mean? And just for example of some of the game mechanics there, this is a skill-based world system, so anything that the characters do, they can get skill scores. So if you want to be a sword fighter, swing some swords around until you get the skill. And then you can improve it as you use it. And so one of the humorous twists on this is that the main character has a sex skill of like 20, which is pretty high in this, right? Because of both her character class and her enjoyment of the act of sex. So again, kind of a cute, humorous nod to the combination of the two genres. There's also an inventory system, levels, health, mana, stamina, the entire thing. And again, for me though, the sex stuff is not really my kind of thing. I don't generally read erotic fiction on its own. I read LitRPG stuff. And so the sex stuff was almost a distraction from a rather good story. Like I said, on its own, even if you took all the sex stuff in this novel, it would still be rather enjoyable to me. But the sex stuff definitely adds a humorous flair to it. And if you're into erotic sex stories, you'll probably enjoy this as well. So it's a nice combination of those two genres, but it's for a very specific audience, unfortunately. And that's mostly not me. When I was reading the story, I skipped the sex stuff. I noted in my notes on writing the story, this percentage is a percentage, she has sex with this particular character, fantasy, whatever. But I was really more interested in like the game stuff and the stuff that the character does as she's progressing in the novel. That was much more interesting to me until you get to the end. And the end is kind of the thing that dropped it from being a good to like being from like a 7 to a 6 for me, because the end just sucked. It was not satisfying. And, there's not a pun intended there, but the ending was not satisfying to me. And so just because the way it ended, it kind of dropped it from a 7 to a 6, because in my opinion, this was entertaining enough, even with all the sex, that it could have been like a full-blown 300-400 page novel and been super entertaining. I would have loved to have seen the main characters make different choices at the very end of the novel. But I also understand that the author probably was just kind of having fun with this novel. So it's a choice. It's a writing choice. So there it is. But for me, overall, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to I think it's our last story, Unexplored, Into the Wilderwood, a LitRPG virtual fantasy adventure, written by Alara Branwen. Okay, this one is a lot longer. It is 212 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Limited, so priced well as well. I'm going to read you my description of it. The main character, Clint, has a master's degree in mathematics and works a job where people complain to him all the time while he fixes their simple math errors on spreadsheets. He has had his pay cut twice already, and while the company's profits soar, and he's feeling basically burnt out and unappreciated at his job. Mary, a friend from the game store he used to work at, convinces him to try a new virtual reality game, Unexplored. That's the name of it. That lets players do whatever they want, whether it's build kingdoms, establish trade routes, or even have sex. So there you go, another one of those. Clint logs into the game on the weekend, thinking he was just going to relieve his boredom for a little while before he starts his pile of weekend work, and he finds an experience that changes his life. So there you go. That's my description of the story. Now, all that setup takes about 7% of the beginning portion of the novel, but it's really well done. It sets you up to understand the crap life the main character has, and how it's going to change, of course, when he starts playing this game. And there is an actual change in his personal life once he starts playing this game. He feels that stress relief for whatever adventures and activities he's doing in the game. But by the 8% mark of the story, the main character is actually in the game, which is always great. And he stays there most of the time with small jumps out of the game, whether it's to go to work or to chat with the game store girl, Mary. The sex scenes in the novel comprise about 14% of the story. They're graphic, but they are honestly the least interesting part of the story. The game mechanics of the story are character sheets, interface systems with non-player characters, spells and scrolls, health and mana bars. One of the more notable game features, I should say, is that small amounts of health can be restored through sex, but the rest of the game is based on like a realistic approach on almost a survival survival game mentality of making the characters work really hard in a challenging world. So you want a fire in the game, you got to row some sticks together, figure out some way to start a fire. No character starts off with any magic spells or any equipment. They're basically sent with like basic clothes and a canteen that runs out of water very quickly. And the characters feel heat, exhaustion, pain, tiredness, hunger, all those things within the game. If you want a weapon, you got to go make one or steal one or kill enough monsters to like trade for one. Players can steal from anybody they want to, but don't be surprised if you get caught and thrown in jail for it. One of the early incidents in the novel that kind of shows the cool flexibility of the world is that the main character steals from a merchant and is able to bluff or lie his way out of getting arrested by pointing out that the merchant really has no proof of the theft. He's using almost like illegal arguments from our world that work in the game. And instead he forces the merchant to either choose between admitting that he gave the character the potions for work that he did, or admitting to the gathered crowd that he got robbed while he was paying for sex. And so I thought that was a really interesting example of the fact that the problems in the story don't have to be solved by combat or by pressing some magic button or some OP skill or spell or whatever. They can just be worked through with intelligence and fortitude and creativity. And that was really cool to me when I'm reading the first part of the story. So I thought that was nice. Unfortunately, all that kind of disappears by about the 43% mark of the story. From there on, it becomes a fairly standard story. It loses a lot of the RPG game portions of the story and feels more like Portal Fantasy, where the main character goes home occasionally and someone says, "Oh, this is a great game," or they're non-player characters, they're not real people. And the story essentially becomes, after that 43% mark, an evil group is up to no good. The main character and his team have to bring together all the good people to fight them. And then, oh, look, they won. That's basically what it is, which is not bad. It's just less interesting and entertaining than the first half of the story implied, or the potential that I saw in the first half story. A lot of it becomes more standard, which was disappointing to me. And of course, there's really sex throughout the story, so it's not like it's not there all the time. Again, it's almost I believe it said it was 14% of the story, so almost a fifth of the novel is just graphic sex scene sex. But again, it's honestly, the sex stuff is, for me, the least interesting part of the novel. All the game stuff, all the LitRPG stuff was more fascinating to me. And again, I kind of skipped through the sex stuff. So I can't exactly tell you whether it was greatly described or not. I don't have a big basin for comparison either. But again, I really enjoyed the first half of the story. The emphasis of the in-game challenge and realism and using intelligence and role-playing to get out of trouble was interesting and fascinating to me. And I would have loved to have seen that novel expanded through the entire thing. But again, all that is lost after that, essentially the halfway point, as weapons, spells, and adventures are just kind of handed to the main character and his group. That and the fact that some of the sex scenes almost feel like they were inserted after the main story was written, as it's like, oh, I should have a sex scene every so often. There are some sex scenes in this novel that are very integral to the story. The secondary story between the main character and the Cobalt Girl in the novel, but relatively few of them are honestly necessary to the story. Most of them are just, there should be a sex scene here, basically. That's what it feels like to me anyways. So because of that, it lessened my enjoyment of the story. The first half of the novel, I would really give a 7 out of 10. Unfortunately, the second half of it was less entertaining and more meh. I would give it a 5 out of 10. So overall, I'll split the difference and give it a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. That is it. We are done. 7 novels reviewed for you folks at home. That's it. Remember, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. And of course, if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. There you go. Again, folks, thanks for listening to me gush about all these stories that I enjoy reading and the genre that I love. Remember, though, it's just my opinion. Go form your own. Read these novels if you're mildly interested, and form your own thoughts. It's cool. It's okay to disagree with me as well. If you have any disagreements, if you think I'm just way off the bat, remember you can always contact us at feedback@geekbytespodcast.com or LitRPG Podcast at gmail.com. Either one will get you a message to me, or you can contact us on Facebook. That's always, I'm there a lot. But again, thanks for hanging out with me. And until we can hang out again, remember, folks, to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody. Hey everyone, this is Ramon Mejia from the LitRPG Podcast, coming to you from on the road, currently in Portland, Oregon, moving up to Washington pretty soon. Just wanted to give you like a little sneak into the, fancy room that my wife booked for us as a little bonus feature at the end of the podcast. So if you've made it this far, folks, good for you. You get the bonus features. I'll give you a quick spin around of where I'm at and our view and everything, and then that'll be it. So let's see if I can remember how to change views. Okay, there you go. So this is our view out the window. And this is the actual fancy room itself. So there you go. It's kind of nice. Sorry if the lighting isn't that awesome. So there you go. That's it, folks. Hope you enjoyed this little tiny extra bit. Read some LitRPG.